Hey everybody, John Lorden here. Welcome to another episode of Brain Scratch Case Cracked. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017. So if you knew that your father had killed someone, would you tell the police? Now, what if the person that he killed was your mother? That's a bit of the issue that we're looking into on today's episode, James O'Neill, Tragedy or Travesty. Lake Worth, Florida. Verna and James O'Neill seemed to have some serious troubles in their relationship. They were divorced in 1981, but remarried in 1983. However, nothing could compare to the troubles they experienced on July 23rd, 1987. Around 7:45 p.m., sheriffs were dispatched to a home on Osborne Circle. They enter to see a 50-year-old woman, Verna O'Neill, with a gunshot wound on the living room sofa. Her husband, James, is hysterical, still on the phone with the 911 operator. On the counter next to him, a .357 Magnum. Verna was still alive. She was rushed to JFK Medical Center in nearby Atlantis, but unfortunately died soon after arriving. Investigators were told by James that they had been fighting over her burning their dinner and drinking too much. Verna pulled out James's gun from under a couch cushion and said, "I'm just going to kill myself." James leapt toward her, struggled with the gun in her right hand. For a moment, it was pointed at James, so he let go. She then moved the gun to her left hand, and the struggle continued. The gun went off. This might explain why the wound is on the left side of her face. However, if someone was right-handed and facing her when they had shot her, that would also put the wound on the left side. I can't find any info to confirm if Verna was right or left-handed, or if James was right or left-handed for that matter. Their daughter, Sharon, who was 28 at the time, was suspicious right from the start, but wouldn't act on her suspicions for many years. The autopsy report stated that Verna's cause of death was undetermined. Deputies concluded that it must have been a suicide because the trigger required far too much pressure to be fired accidentally. In October of 2016, nearly 30 years later, James was 83 years old when his daughter finally worked up the courage to ask the question, "Did you kill my mother?" He admitted that he did, and then gave her a sickening amount of detail. The struggle did start as he previously explained. She threatened to shoot herself. However, he wrestled the gun away and said, "Let me show you how it's done," and then shot Verna. He pleaded with his daughter to keep it a secret, apologizing and saying it was an accident. Later that night, he texted her saying, "I'm believing that you will sleep much better tonight. Love, Dad." Their daughter would sit with that information for 4 months before contacting the authorities. On April 4th of 2017, police met with James and his current wife, Doris. They told him that they were reopening the case. He gave him the same story. However, this time, he says that Verna was handing the gun to him when it went off. James insisted the gun was a hair trigger, but had no explanation for why his finger would have even been on the trigger when it was being handed over to him. He also seemed to be unaware that the gun's trigger was tested in 1987 and found to require a normal amount of pressure. James retracted his statements about struggling with the gun, saying that he told them that before because he was worried about getting into trouble. Based off this new information, a medical examiner changed the cause of death to homicide. On April 12th, police detectives visited James again, this time reciting his Miranda rights before questioning him further. His story changed slightly again, with him noting that he was very upset about dinner being burned. He said once again that Verna threatened suicide, but this time he states that he took the gun, saying, "No, you're not." And then he also possibly stated, "What are you trying to do? This is a gun. You're trying to kill yourself." Although the story is changing slightly from instance to instance, this last version certainly hits me weird. He's stating this is a gun. Would you really say that if it wasn't in your possession? And then he's repeating to her, you're trying to kill yourself, even though in every version of the story before, she had clearly stated that herself. Why would he repeat it to her? If that wasn't damning enough, detectives also asked about his confession to his daughter, and he admitted having that conversation with her. Several months later, he was arrested and charged with manslaughter with a firearm. On August 11th of 2017, James was released on a $50,000 bond, but he is to be kept on house arrest, wearing an ankle monitor while awaiting trial. The judge stated that he could live with his current wife, Doris, while on house arrest. Doris, who married James the year following Verna's death, says she does not fear her husband coming home and doesn't require a no contact order, which was offered to her. Case cracked? I don't know. We have to get to the trial at this point. I believe the case is cracked here. I don't know if we're really going to see much more information come out in terms of evidence. One of the things that occurred to me when I was learning about this story was gunshot residue testing. I know that's something that is fairly common nowadays. I don't think it was as common in the 80s. It was kind of getting developed from the early 70s, and standards were still being set in the early 80s. Outside of that, I believe it might be an expensive type of testing, so I don't know if it was all that common back then, but I'd be very curious if they did look at Verna's hands for any gunshot residue to see if her hand was even close to the gun when it was fired, if they tested James's hand to see if he fired it or not. According to his second version of the story, he did, I guess in all versions, he was close enough to the gun that he might have some residue on his hand. Really the question for me is, would Verna have had some residue on hers? But I don't know that we'll see the answer to that question. Outside of this, there are stories that I cover every so often, and I just have to shake my head about domestic violence. It is just such a wrong thing. I mean, if you're in a relationship like that, just do the right thing and end it. Get out free and clear. Give yourself a chance to move in a new direction and put a new life together. Give the other person a chance to go put a new life together. I don't know why people get to this point where things like this can happen. There's no mention if James was drinking too much on this night. I'd be very curious to have some information about that as well. Or was it just Verna that was an alcoholic, perhaps struggling, and James decided to kill her because he couldn't deal with her anymore? I did look into a company. Here in the U.S., there's an agency that has been working since 1996 to help victims of domestic violence. The National Domestic Violence Hotline can be called toll-free 24/7, 365 days a year at 1-800-799-7233. And if you don't want to talk to someone on the phone, you can even chat with someone online during select hours. But you can find out about that by visiting their website at www.thehotline.org. They get about 1,000 requests for help per day. Yes, per day, not just business day, every day of the year. They're handling over 350,000 requests for help every single year. On top of them being a great resource out there, they also need support to continue being that resource. Please consider donating to them. You can do it also from the website, www.thehotline.org. And on behalf of myself and my amazing Patreon supporters, thank you guys so much for allowing me to do things like this. We have made a contribution to the National Domestic Violence Hotline today of $75, and I can't do it without you guys. Thank you for letting me help these people in that way. If you are outside of the U.S., please reach out and find help. There are people out there that care and can help you. No one should live in fear of this same sort of story happening to them in their personal life. Thank you guys so much for joining me here on Case Cracked today. Stay safe, stay happy. come back here tomorrow and we'll talk more on the Lord and Arts channel.